You know, man, I'm telling you guys, tonight is a treat. And I am very, very, very happy to be joined by the my favorite guest co-host in the entire world, and that is Wes Moody of the OG Wes Moody webcast of Whatevercast. And he is even though they're trying to suppress him and give him a hard time, you know, we understand why they do it. And that's because Wes is in pursuit of the truth, just like your boy here. And that's what we're about. You know, we're never going to stop. We're never going to quit this. And I think tonight's subject kind of reflects that because, as I said, this stream's going to be a banger. It is. Because, this is one of those cool streams about the Midnight Prism that, normally we talk about the paranormal and the unexplained, but this crisscrosses into all kind of those territories. It kind of branches out because, over the years, some of the greatest, quote, unexplained phenomena and things of that nature really and truly come down to a portion of psychological operations. And that is the topic that we have tonight, better known as psyops, by the way. That's what the short word psyop means, psychological operation. And Wes and I will kind of go through some of the more famous ones because, Operation Paperclip is very relevant. Operation Mockingbird is very relevant.
Very
So
relevant.
we're going to break some of those down for you, for the layman, so that you kind of understand what's going on here. Because a very interesting thing, and you can make the argument of this, and this goes, by the way, with this past week's news dropping, with all of the Twitter files drops, because as you can see, and as we just mentioned, the Operation Mockingbird, which was actually, by the way, originally collusion between the intelligence community and mainstream media. So, and this goes back to what, Wes, about the 50s? You want to say with Mockingbird?
Well, I think Mockingbird tied back to I thought the 60s, but it could be the 50s. It's been a while since I
I want
really
to
looked into it.
say I want to say originally about the very late 50s. But
Yeah.
but what Mockingbird is, Operation Mockingbird is the CIA originally had the both with the great comment. Jennifer Lawrence admitted psyops. That's a great comment, Bone. You got comment of the night so far in the chat. Um, but yeah, the thing is with Mockingbird, that was where you directly had the intelligence community, representatives of the intelligence community, directly tied into mainstream news. So the people you were seeing on your news broadcasts, on the national news broadcasts especially, were assets a lot of times. And those people, they had sway over how the news was reported, over what was emphasized, all of it. And by the way, that's an active operation. There was no indication that that operation has ever ended. And
Well, they
now,
officially ended the name Operation Mockingbird. It's probably under some different moniker or several different monikers at this point, but yes, you're right.
yeah, because you think about it, okay, by extension, what we're seeing with the social media companies, and it's now out there, folks. And, before I go into detail here, I want to say hello to our wonderful chatters that are watching, all of our viewers. Welcome to those of you on the Twitch side, and also those of you on the main channel on YouTube. We're simulcasting on Twitch tonight. I thought this would be a nice little treat to include on the Twitch channel, because I don't think I've ever had an episode of the Midnight Prism on the Twitch channel. So this is a new one for this evening. So I'm glad to be simulcasting on both platforms. So now let's say hello to our friends. Tehillim29 is here. Hail to Tehillim. Hail to our good friend RR, pulling double duty on the YouTube side. He's modding and he's hanging out in the chat. Thank you for your hard work as always, RR. Appreciate you, buddy. You know, because you always watch my 6 on the late night streams. So thank you so much for that. Keck44 is here. Hail to our buddy Keck. Hail to Bone, who had that great comment just a second ago. Great to see you, bud. And Sci-Fi Nation is here. Hail to you, our friend Sci-Fi Nation. Jay, great to see you. And Philip Gaming is over on the Twitch side. What's up, Phil? Great to see you, man.
Phil.
Thanks for hanging out over there and populating the Twitch side a little bit. And Mr. CCDB is in the audience tonight. Hail to you, CCDB. So, and we've got Will, who is, of course, a panel member on United Resistance. Shout out to our Tuesday program, United Resistance. Hail, Will. Good to see you. So, yeah, getting into Mockingbird, the natural progression is, and we've seen this from the Twitter files because it's proven. So, you know, I know a lot of you, maybe some of you that aren't necessarily logged into the chat on Twitch, but maybe casually watching this. Twitch tends to be a bit more of an echo chamber of the norm and the popular narrative, as does YouTube. But by extension, we know, and this is verifiable information within the Twitter files, it comes from reputable sources. It comes directly from company, you know, communications, records, the whole 9 yards. We know that the intelligence community was directly involved with day-to-day operations on Twitter. Yep. And by extension, you have to figure the big platforms in social media, i.e. Facebook, also, all right, Google, which, by the way, Google is very tied in to the globalist side of this. So it stands to reason that you have a large contingent of the intelligence of the global intelligence community involved at Google, as well as with Facebook, and probably, as we're still finding out, with Twitter, because it's not just the American CIA, FBI, NSA, any of those agencies. You know, you're talking about, you know, people like Mossad, GSG-9 from Germany. You're talking about, you know, other interests
MI6.
such as MI6, yes. And there is a whole lot to unravel here, folks. So it's not just we're not just giving you what they like to call tinfoil hattage or anything like that. You have verifiable information now to refer to. So this is beyond that. This is, you know, this is just, it used to be 30 years ago, we would never conceive of this. Now we're deep in the weeds. We're in unprecedented territory. And, you know, you can make the argument through operations such as Mockingbird that all of this lead up was to, well, create a false reality. I mean, are we far off, Wes, from making that connection?
I think, well, I mean, we have to, you know, draw a distinction between ourselves, truth seekers, and the normies. You know, And I think at this point they think that they've controlled reality. At this, I think that God, I mean, this is, I mean, we were talking before the show, and you were talking about what a rabbit hole this is, and it is. It's a huge rabbit hole, and it ties into so many other things. But I mean, we're talking about shaping reality and the reality of their misdeeds and what your perception is versus the reality. And Mockingbird supposedly ended, and that was the end of it. And if you really dive down the rabbit hole, you'll see that they have duplicate operations, or they'll have backup operations. They'll have operations where they simultaneously are running the same operation under different names. And if you find out about one, that maybe they'll let you, it's called a limited hangout is what it's called. Oh, you found out about it. That's everything that was going on, basically, is how that goes. And it's like, it's over now, but it wasn't. They had parallel operations working. And what really these Twitter files show, and again, I'm a Musk, I'm just never going to trust an oligarch. It's never going to happen.
No.
I applaud him for, I applaud him for what he's doing now. And certainly, I recognize the value in these files being released. And, it's just, Mockingbird, the definition of it, what it was, it never ended. And you're seeing that now with the Twitter files and how reality is shaped. I mean, whatever, people thought about Trump, I mean, people, Trump is Hitler, Trump is evil. And that's the narrative they tried to shape. And, we have a lot of discordant voices. We have a lot of, in our own alternative community about, there's a lot of disagreement. And, I mean, but I'll agree with one of them, comedian Dave Smith. He's like, hey, Donald Trump isn't Hitler. Donald Trump's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a rich dude that likes banging strippers and has an ego. And just my own personal addendum to that is, yes, that, you had a guy that was a rich guy that was banging strippers and has an ego and somehow overcame their misdeeds and their propaganda, and still ended up being really the best president probably of my lifetime, and probably the best president we've had since Calvin Coolidge, really.
Well, one of the great policy presidents of all time, as far as just common sense policy. I'll give it to that. And anybody that has discernment, again, and that's a key thing we're going to talk about tonight as well, folks, is having the discernment. Woke Breaker, and welcome to the Woke Breaker. Great to see you, buddy. He says, guys, remember Jade Helm, Operation Jade Helm. R said, it's all part of the PSYOP to dismantle nations. Tobat says, none of you are real. Hey, Tobat, great to see you. I want to get into the side of it where, as we talk about Mockingbird and we talk about, perpetuating false reality. Well, you go back to everything that has been pushed in major media, i.e., back when we were younger, it was global warming or the hole in the ozone. And they always make it these panic level sort of events. You have to be invested in this because this could be an existential crisis. They always would use words, words to kind of, jog your mind to really create an alarmist type of response. As Tobat said, yeah, the sky is falling. It's an old Chicken Little parable. Or as Philip Gaming says, beware of the acid rain. Yeah, there was that too. Yeah. So we've seen it. It was all leading up to that, because through when we were younger, and I'm in my 40s, I'm a Gen X child, but we were told about the hole in the ozone and the acid rain, and how continents would be underwater and things of that nature. And then it got into, the global warming when Al Gore started pushing that, and the mainstream media was pushing that. And then you had more of the climate activists start to really come into play, and that narrative was pushed. And that narrative has constantly been in there, because what do we see on the side of like organizations such as the World Economic Forum? Well, their whole platform is built on the existential crisis that we face with climate change. So there's that, which is, when you break it down, a big bunch of bunk. But, all of the stuff that we've experienced over the past 3 to 5 years, whether it be the narrative of COVID, whether it be the narrative that, again, amplifying very small subsections of what the actual population of the planet is, which is normally traditional families, normal working people. They give you the sort of perception based on amplifying certain voices, and I'm talking about this now in the digital age on the social media side. So when you see something from the trans community, or this or that, or LGBT issue here, or BLM over here, these are meant to amplify it as these, like, they're great scores of the population. But really and truly, when you break it down and you see street level reality in front of your face, when you walk outside and you have actual interactions with people socially outside of the internet, it doesn't add up, because you can see it in the demographics in your own city or town where you come from. It's just not the case of street level reality that these people are a majority, even though it's portrayed that way within popular media, within entertainment, within social media, that these are, and that these people are dictating your day-to-day, the direction of our culture, everything else. But in truth, in fact, the average citizen, okay, is the larger portion of this group. And to somebody with activism brain, I like to call it activism brain, they would come into the stream and say, oh, well, you're just speaking in code, you mean white people. No, what I mean is just actual normal people. It's not just white people, it's white people, it's black people, it's people of all different races, colors, creeds, but traditional people, families, real families, not not this weird fantasy dichotomy, or my two dads or my two moms. We're talking traditional families. But what I'm trying to say is, yeah, there has been a false reality built, and it's built to push a narrative so that you feel with all of your being that this narrative is the real one. And what you see with your eyes and everything when you go out into daily life, well, that's not your actual reality. They're basically confusing your mind. They're trying to retool it. And that's the whole purpose of a psychological op, is to go and warp your perception in order to make you conform to whatever the person or entity pushing the psychological op wants to gain in the end, what their end goal is. So they want to push you towards whatever it is that benefits them with their end goal, whatever that goal is, whether it's to alter your perception of reality, whether it's to, take your money, whatever it is. That is the objective. So they're going to do it through different means. And, we've seen it with the, we've seen it especially with Mockingbird and Jade Helm and things of that nature, because it's there and it's undeniable now. It's just hit another level because it's now full on in social media. And this is a global phenomenon, by the way, because again, if you look what happened in West, this from the Brazilian elections, okay? Anybody that had that dared to dissent or speak up against the extreme leftist liberal candidate, who, by the way, is World Economic Forum affiliated, that won, they were suppressed. Anybody that criticized Lula was suppressed. They were same thing that happened with people that raised the alarm or raised questions about the American elections, or anything that had to do even back like with Brexit. Again, people were they monkeyed around with accounts. They amplified some and de-amplified others. And that was for a very specific reason. Because again, this is a carefully crafted narrative. And it's across multiple things. So, I tend to stick to geopolitics and politics. But mark my words, many of our fellow YouTubers and Twitch creators, whatever, that talk about pop culture, it's in that space too. It's in every major space, in every major, what we used to consider escape. This narrative has permeated, and it was 100% permeated by, operations, because they had people that were either willing participants or just, brainwashed carriers. But either way, they carried this ideology and these ideas into all of our institutions and spaces. So that is, I think, the biggest danger of the psychological op. The Ruben Christopher Haynes, hail to you, buddy. And hail to you, Marby Dog, and Krampus Jeebus. Thank you for being here as well. My Two Dads was a great show. Yes, it was.
It actually was a pretty good show.
Yeah, Ruben Christopher Haynes says, chat, do you believe that Tesla and Newton, among other, had visions or at least figured out free energy and other healing tech that the elite globalists suppress this knowledge to have control of us? Well, yes. Absolutely, yes. Go ahead, Wes, and
yeah. Nikola Tesla talked about, this field that he tapped into where there's knowledge of the universe, and that he's like, I can't define it. You're asking me to talk about it, but it exists, and I believe that field is real, and so I believe people have tapped into that, and that there is more knowledge than, I think one of the things that happened in World War II is they seized all of his documentation and classified a large number of that. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think that's the case there.
Documentation was seized, and a lot of it had to do with corporate espionage and the fact that they wanted to corporatize it and not have it be a widespread thing for humanity. Everybody wants to monetize everything.
Well, supposedly a lot of people have tried, and they've had patents. They're like, hey, I've discovered the secret to free energy or close to free energy, cold fusion. They patented that stuff, and then those people don't hear from them again. I think there was some guy in Oklahoma that did something like that, and he was supposed to meet with somebody to talk about his inventions, and he disappeared. Alleged suicide, I believe that was the case.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always the legend. Sci-Fi
Mhm.
Nation says 40 boxes of research missing. Yes. And that's a big key, because a lot of this stuff, and to again go back to Midnight Prism territory, even we talk about something like Operation Bluebeam, which is another one that could be coming down the pike. What is Operation Bluebeam? Well, Operation Bluebeam is a fake staged alien invasion. Also, there a lot of times the fake second coming is associated with that. And that's a very important operation if that were to go into effect, because okay, the the Christian people are hard to sway, and they have to do something to deceive people that really, people of faith, because it's really hard when you have faith in something to sway your mind. Because usually when you have faith in something and you have strong faith in something, it's hard to brainwash you. So that is the purpose of Operation Bluebeam, is to try to pull in those people of faith that are in the Judeo-Christian mindset. Not just traditional Christians, but all of the people that filter out the different denominations, to make them think that God has come back, when in reality, that's not it at all. It's all going to be staged through a number of elaborate hoaxes, holograms, things of that nature. Now, we can get into the territory as well with UFOs, because we often discuss on this program, because Midnight Prism deals with the paranormal and the unexplained, when we talked about UFOs, we've talked about the technology, we've seen the footage where different military planes and civilian planes and even ships have interacted with objects that can't be explained, especially in the way they move, the way they maneuver, and things like that. When we're talking about Tesla's technology and everything else, well, don't think for a second that the government didn't have access to that. And welcome
Yeah.
back, Wes.
Yeah. So look, with Tesla, I mean, here's what I want to know. I mean, so Wardenclyffe, right? It seems like it'd be pretty easy to make a miniature scale of Wardenclyffe. Has anybody done that? I've been looking all over for it and I can't find it. Because you'd think I mean, does it have to be that scale? Because in the grand scheme of the universe and the planet, it's not that big. I mean, is it possible to make a smaller scale Wardenclyffe? I don't know.
Yeah.
If maybe we've had a great interview with Laura Logan. Maybe we can have a great interview with Bob Lazar. Should we try to get Bob Lazar on the show?
I'll tell you, Wes, it wouldn't hurt to do that, or at least reach out to the gentleman that talked to him, George Knapp. It wouldn't hurt to even reach out to George Knapp and see, if we could discuss that with him. George Knapp's a pretty dang good investigative journalist in his own right. So, no matter
I would just be happy spending an hour with Bob Lazar talking about hydrogen cars and generating hydrogen. I would be fine with that. I wouldn't even have to go into the S4 stuff.
Yeah. And again, I think we're far more advanced and discerning people across the globe understand. Our government obviously don't let us in on the majority of things. So plenty of nations have far more advanced tech than they let on to their citizens to know. Even if it would benefit their entire, the entire population of their country or everything else. You always have that conflict with those who control the resources, i.e., the big baron families that control, the major resources that are used in life, whether it be, gas, whether it be oil, whether it be, take your pick, banks, which again, we want to get into the whole sweeping organization that is the global elite. Well, you could really go back to the central bank cartel. That's where your origins are. The Swiss, a large contingent of Jewish and non-Jewish people. I mean, you name it. But these were the people that were the bloodlines and the families that were originally involved in finance. And then you had, the industrialites, basically the big industrial families that used their sway, or the 13 original families, if you will.
Suppose I haven't really done a deep dive on it, but I guess there's a hypothesis that J.P. Morgan was a British agent, and that basically.
And that makes sense, Wes, because again, all this crisscrossing into the intelligence community, all the intelligence apparatus, it's a natural progression. Remember, Eisenhower raised the alarm on the military-industrial complex side, but he also, to a degree, raised the alarm on the three-letter agencies. Kennedy was going to really expose the rampant corruption and the concerning almost weaponization, even back then, political weaponization of the FBI and different associated other agencies. And still, they're having a fight over declassifying a lot of the Kennedy files, even now.
Yep.
Even though Biden said recently he was going to declassify some, but they just kicked the can down the road. There hasn't been any declassification at all. So there's a lot. It goes back to secrets and lies, folks. And most times it's lies, and the secrets are never going to come out because they don't want the truth of how far the corruption goes. I put it on my Twitter not too long ago. I was replying to Laura, our friend, our good friend Laura Logan. I was replying to her, and I said, "Hey, Laura Logan, we're in the biggest conspiracy in human history. We're in the midst of that right now. We have a front row seat for it. And it's going to take all the professional journalists and all the citizen journalists that we have working overtime to expose this. Because if all of the dots are connected, folks, and all of this were to come out, you're talking, this would change the world to such a degree. I mean, because instantly, if all these people were to be held accountable, and I'm talking international tribunals, everybody involved was rounded up and held to account by what the law should be, even what international law should be, you would see a shift in the world because there would be actual freedom. The power would be back within, decentralized and put more within the hands of the citizenry. That's how it should work in countries that are, quote, democratic, which I hate to say democratic, period, because democratic these days is authoritarian.
Yeah. And, I mean, if we're going back to our main topic here, psyops in the modern age, Twitter and such and thus, I mean, we look at this, we look at the centralization that they want to have, the new world order, if you will, very top-down authoritarian style quasi super state is how they're rolling it out. You know, if you really dig deep into that, you know, as far as Twitter trying to maintain that, they're in trouble. The internet, you know, our inventions, the inventiveness of mankind here, you know, this wonderful tool that allows people to connect in a way that was never thought possible before. Logistics, you know, I mean, you could say, yeah, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb and that changed humanity. Or you could say Henry Ford, you know, by looking at what they did in meat packing plants and the assembly line, you know, I mean, which one is which? One's an inspired genius and the other is nuts and bolts. You know, you have an assembly line.
Right.
And simple stuff like that the internet would allow people to network on, to get those logistics in there, to wholesale and connect. You know, you don't need establishments with the internet. You can just have these tactical alliances. So it makes it harder to co-opt and control. And what they're seeing is that we're not the problem. We're not the ones that are obsolete. They are. There's just no reason for a top-down authoritarian or a top-down vertically integrated society with the internet, the way you can connect with logistics. You know, going back to that Henry Ford versus Thomas Edison situation, where you have inspired genius, the light bulb, and then you have, you know, a guy nuts and bolts assembly line. And so you know, the internet's kind of like that. You know, it allows for the new assembly lines to be had, and then the internet itself is that inspired piece of genius, the light bulb.
Hail to Eternal Vigilance, by the way. Great to see you, buddy. Thank you for stopping by. And, you know, Tobat says, Viva de Revolucion. And you know, honestly, it is a good thing here in America. We are a constitutional republic, Tobat. But, you know, you have all these forces working against the Constitution because they're trying to, you know, that pesky Constitution, they're trying to get around what should be the basis for all of our law, but they're trying to get around that. So, yeah, you know, and Haster, you bring up a good point, and hail to you as well. Yeah, they're outdated to a degree, but they keep schools around because they're indoctrination facilities. They're indoctrination facilities. Because remember, okay, all of what you see that's being churned out now, and we can argue that there's been a lost generation. If you look at the activist generation now and Gen Z, and I don't want to say all of Gen Z, because there are some brilliant young kids out here that aren't swayed into the nonsense. But largely, a lot of them have been indoctrinated via this split reality. So they're feeding them the reality of all of the authoritarian style things being the norm, instead of, you know, actual down to the cracks in the sidewalk reality. They're not giving it to those kids. They're giving them a very specific kind, which is what leads to the split reality, split society. Tobat argues that there's 2 lost generations, almost 3. Yeah, you could say that to a point, but you know, I think more so, and I hate to get on the generational thing, because then we start pointing fingers at this generation's more fucked up than this one, and this and that. You know, I mean, I have my own personal bias, because I think about when I was born. You know, I'm a Gen Xer. I don't apologize for that. I'm the stick my finger up at authority generation, and I'm pretty suspect of everyone. I don't just conform to what people tell me, but that goes back to how we grew up. Unfortunately, you know, you have the older people, the greatest generation that are left, plus you have the boomers that are left, and they're in the bubble of you know, they're maybe not even cognizant of all the changes in the timeline and all the, and in the different realities. So, you try to
Well,
explain
see,
it.
well, that's what's so good about these psyops, isn't it?
Yeah.
They have them. So they have all of these people that are basically, we'll call them the useful idiots through their psyops.
Mhm.
The people that are telling them to be anti-establishment are the establishment, and the things that they're telling them to be anti-establishment about serve the establishment. And that's where we are. And it's weird to see. And you and I see it. And that's what's so extraordinary about looking at Project Mockingbird and looking at what we have now. The powers that be looked at all this stuff and they said, well, we're just never going to win, saying that we're the establishment. So we need to make them think that they're actually being anti-establishment. And then comes in, tell me if you've heard this one, Drew. There needs to be exceptions to save our democracy. There need to be exceptions. MAGA people are racists. They're akin to the KKK and Nazis. And therefore, we can make an exception to get them fired from their jobs. We can make an exception to name and shame those folks. We can make an exception to,
Well,
for extrajudicial justice for these folks. We can.
well,
We need to make an exception to save our democracy. Go ahead. I'm done.
no, there was a salacious change, okay, in language. So you had different words, different buzzwords weaponized. And this is part of the PSYOP in general. Okay. You had a word like fascist. You have words, buzzwords like nationalist. They like to attach a particular racial color to that. So they say white nationalist. It's supposed to be a trigger word. It's to go and drill into your brain to make that a trigger. So that
Mhm.
is why they can lead people around. All they have to do is wind up these words and say white nationalist over there, and then everybody will turn and go, huh? You know, and it's not that at all. If you're a nationalist, then you're for the sovereignty of your country and solving the problems of your particular country first, and solving the problems of your people first. Okay, that's all that nationalism is. And patriotism is having pride in your country, saluting your country's flag wherever that may be. It isn't like, and people have always conflated patriotism. If you're a proud American, well, then you're on board with everything the government does. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're just a proud American. You're proud of your country. If you're a nationalist, all you care about is closing the borders and being mean to people. No, that's not it at all. It's called keeping your border secure so that you don't take on more citizens before you handle the problems of the everyday citizens before you bring more in. You see what I'm saying? That, again, it's prioritization, but that is painted as bad because it goes against the narrative. And what they wanted to do, craft with the narrative, was the whole idea of social justice and all of the ESG stuff. It gave them a sort of facade of being, well, look at us. We're the heroes. We're for justice, social justice.
Yeah, well, that's what
You
they want to do. They want to subvert the rule of law, and they want it to be
Mhm.
all about how you're feeling. It's not equality, meaning 2 + 2 = 4. It's about equity. 2 + 2 is whatever I'm feeling, and whatever I feel like I deserve. And there's never a concrete number for that. It's always however I feel. And if somebody says what I want them to say, and it sounds like that's something that will serve me, then I will serve it. That's the propaganda. That's where we're at. But we're
Yeah,
not into equality anymore.
any other thing is, Wes, and hail to you, Tina Bojan. Great to see Tina, and thank you, Tina,
Hey,
for
Tina.
not only being here in the chat and hanging out with us, but for also renting. Thank you so much for that. But you know, Eternal Vigilance says they've been working around common law for a very long time. They're succeeding because we're all fat and happy. But when the globalists drop the hammer, everybody is going to wonder what happened. Well, you know, and the veneer is starting to wear away. The curtain is being pulled back, Vigilance, and that's the thing. When you have this Twitter files drop, and even though the mainstream media is trying to fight it with everything they can by not covering it or by calling it nothing burger or this or that, you know, you can argue semantics about the certain company things that happened at Twitter, but what you can't argue is that, again, major intelligence agencies around the world are influencing the citizenry in definite ways via tech platforms, via government, via mainstream media as well. So that is not arguable anymore. That is out there, and that in the Twitter files itself, you know, proves that, and also provides a framework to understand that these actions are not only manipulation through those different vehicles, but all right, you're looking at manipulation if they want of preferred candidates, preferred information leading into voting and things like that. So they're restricting the flow of information or changing the perception of information based on, you know, trying to get pro social justice or pro Great Reset, whatever candidates in there to push the policy that they want in order to continue to fast track this groundwork to this Great Reset in. And you know, but I don't think they counted on having a billionaire that has, I guess, some sort of, I don't know if you want to say he just has conscience or he has maybe, you know,
my theory is that he's terminally ill and that he doesn't give a fuck anymore. But or that he's controlled opposition. Those are my two theories.
Or in some way the guy has a code of honor, even though we can make the argument with Elon Musk with the Neuralink stuff and everything else that he is on the transhumanism train, and that's not a good train either. So that's why I will not ever fully be in the guy's camp, but just as I am fair with everybody, you know, because I call out President Trump when he's an asshole, I will call out Elon Musk when he's an asshole, but when he does good things, I will be behind the good thing that the guy has done. And what he's done is provide a transparent look into just exactly what's being done on the manipulation end. And hail Adega, great to see you. You know,
good to see you, Adega. Yes. Yeah, we need to. I mean, I've got such mixed feelings on Musk, and you know, many in the chat know my stance on Musk. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You know, is this being really, you know, I mean, he could be controlled opposition if he is, you know, he's releasing these things. He's seeing if people care. He's letting them know if, you know, the wealthy elites, whether or not people care, whether or not they're ready to revolt. Getting rid of the censorship could be a way of getting better data, because when you skew the results like that, you fuck up your data set. When you have that many users, that's a very accurate measure of what people's true feelings are. So I have mixed feelings on Musk.
Yeah, hail to Low Spec Linux laptop. Great of you to be in the chat this evening.
I welcome the release of the data, though. I mean, I think regardless of whatever psyop they're going to try and run later, or if Twitter gets sold to someone else who maybe is more pro censorship, which is what I think is going to happen.
Probably.
You know, I think that you know, the data is out there and it's going to be out there and it'll be available. So that, I mean, that's a good, you know, take your victories where you can find them. But you know, am I a fan? Anybody that is that wealthy and that has the connections that he has, I'm always going to be a skeptic. You know, you're always going to be on probation. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and eternal, um you know where my faith lies. My faith lies with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and that's why when I see disturbing imagery like that or things of that nature, I take a pause. But but to be fair, right now I will be behind Elon Musk from the standpoint of getting this out there because people do deserve to know. People across the globe deserve to know just the amount that they've been misled, and that gives them at least to the normie a peer into the window, if you will, of just how you've been misled. And
Absolutely.
maybe it leads that person to do more research and to really wake themselves up. And for that, I take my hat off to Musk, even though I don't trust him either. But at the end of the day, when you look at all this, um, the next Twitter
Well,
files
well,
drop
again,
is
Laura, the interview we did with Laura Logan, she said she does trust him. So, I mean, I think Laura has a pretty good head on her shoulders. But again, I mean, it, and I welcome the releases as well. I mean, again, I have mixed feelings about it. He wants to make Twitter an everything app like WeChat in China, and it makes you wonder what the
yeah,
end game is of something like that. And
yeah,
again, if you're going to go with heavy AI like that, you have to have reliable data sets and censorship. Again, when you have censorship and you have those thumbs on the scale, that's going to mess up your algorithm. You're not going to get a true measure of what people really believe and think, and that's very valuable. And so, who knows where it's going to lead? I find the fact that a single app where you buy and sell your digital currency, you have your social credit score. It's going to work here. It's not going to work there. You didn't get your vaccination. You have a red tag. I find that a bit alarming. I mean, but for now, right now, with what's being done right now, I'm happy to share the information, and it is proof.
yeah, it is proof, and that's the thing, and eternal vigilance. Yeah, you and I are on the same page, brother. I am concerned, and I go back to the Bible and what they say about the Antichrist for this one, and look, people can call me crazy about that, because there's a lot of people that are dick riding Elon for all of this right now, and I understand why they're dick riding for him, but it's kind of to steal a quote from Stone Cold Steve Austin back in the day, DTA, don't trust anybody. And no, I don't trust anybody, especially when it comes to, billionaires and politicians. So, that's it in a nutshell. Now, now what I will say, okay, is, this this sort of thing, speaks to the Twitter files. The next one will be about the COVID stuff. So that is what we should really be on the lookout for when it comes to Twitter file stuff. Is I want to know the extent of the COVID part of it, because we're still seeing even now. Um, and this goes along with the manipulation of mainstream media that we were talking about before. Okay, look how weird sudden deaths are reported now. They used to be reported pretty freely. Even notable deaths reported very freely. They'd say, well, so and so died of a heart attack or this or that, whatever. Even the way Kirstie Alley's death was reported was a little bit off. And you
Yeah.
have to ask yourself, well, why? Well, and I'll urge you, for those of you that want to do your own research, maybe you didn't hear it here, but maybe you want to look up something like the hashtag like died suddenly, all one word, and see what happens from there. because there's allegedly possibly some kind of movie or something that you could see on platforms like Rumble and others. But you know,
It's on
these are
Odyssey and BitChute too.
yeah, these are things that raise the question as to, okay, well, what exactly is going on, and we don't know until the curtain gets pulled back a little bit. But definitely the way that sudden deaths are reported now, and you got this thing called sudden adult death syndrome now, all kind of weirdness, and this has been a pivot in just the past 10 years. So I mean, you have to think about that too, because remember, we were given narrative that COVID was the thing that was, again, and what is the commonality here? Existential threat. You were told it was an existential threat. It was a pandemic. So it was a very, almost extinction level event that they're pushing on you. But we don't know, okay, in the long run, and I'm not going to sit here and try to debate people's medical decisions. So whatever you choose to do to respond to something like C-19, that's up to you. But what is there are more things coming out all the time that quite possibly some of the cures were worse than the disease. And what do we know that is one game that is played by elites and by big corporations, especially big pharma, is that a lot of times they what do? They sell the infection and they sell the cure. And they
I would add
profit.
here that supposedly the cure was available before the disease. Just saying.
Yeah, and so look, I'm not going to pretend to have the facts, and I'm not going to pretend to say one thing is this, one thing is that, because I don't want YouTube to sit here and say, oh, you're pushing misinformation. Well, hey, look, I look at all data, and I'll leave it at that. So I let people use their discernment and make up their own mind. So whatever you choose to do on that front, that's fine. But we're going to find out a lot of things via the next batch of Twitter files and the ones having to do dealing directly with pandemic related things. And hail to you, awesome one. Great to see you.
Hail, my friend.
Glad that you joined in this evening.
So, I mean, I don't know. Are the normies a lost cause? Are the lefties a lost cause? You have your Jimmy Dores of the world that are out there, and they're I mean, he was just on Michael Malice recently. He was described as a red pill lefty. I mean, are we just like giving up on red pilling people at this point? We're building our networks and we're getting ready for whatever comes, or are we still trying to red pill people here?
I don't know.
I mean, we're so far down. Let me just finish here. We're so far down the line at this point that go ahead.
I don't know that we're necessarily red pilling people, Wes. I think it's more at this point we're discernment pilling people, because it doesn't have to do with, you can hold traditional conservative values. You could be a sex, drug, and rock and roll conservative, because that's what I consider myself. Yeah, sure, I'm Catholic. I believe in God and everything else. But, my God, largely through my life, I've raised hell and I've partied, man, and my horns hold up my halo. I don't apologize for that. I don't apologize for who I am. It shaped my character. It shaped who I am. I have a sense of honor. I have a sense of being a proud American, and that's all I care about. I don't sit here and have to, thump the Bible or anything like that, and sit here and preach to people. I don't have to do that to prove that I belong as that my conservative values are any better than anybody else's. What I do need to do is just be a good American and try to help my brothers and sisters, which is what I'm here to do as a journalist, as a commentator, the whole 9 yards. That's what I'm here to do. I just want to share information, and I want people to be discerning about what's happening so that you don't get sucked into psyops. But you have to be careful as well, because there's a lot of times where you can misread something and say, oh, that's a psyop, and it isn't. So what we really have to do is develop our antenna, if you will, and be careful about our discernment. But largely, it's good to be more of a skeptic and ask more questions and do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Because usually if you're being fed a popular narrative, it's not for your benefit. Go ahead, Wes.
Well, I will say that some of the more interesting pastors I've heard have been people that, have been on the dark side and have reformed, because, they have a little bit more of insight into human nature in a way that maybe somebody that was raised, in a family of pastors and that was the family business, maybe in a way that folks like that have not. And I'm not a Christian, and I certainly see a certain value in it. I've gone to church with friends before, and there is something about being in the same place with a large group of people in worship, fellowship, I guess you call it. That could be soothing. The Sunday Christian phenomenon really turns me off. People that were again, it usually comes from people that were raised in that environment. It's like, this is a networking place. This is a place where I have to go to church. Like those types of people that aren't really true believers. That kind of turned me off of church. But yeah, red pilling people at this point, I'm looking at the chat here. I'm seeing Papa Cotton and RR, and they're like, yeah, the writing's on the wall. If you don't see it now, you're forever lost. It should be on the wall. I totally agree. You should be able to see it. But we're talking about psyops here, Drew. If you were raised on or in a family where you turn on network news, that's where you get your news. You turn on MSNBC, that's where you get your news. And, anything else, you're just not even going to look at it. And then you hear the propaganda from those sources, and it's like, I can't do that. Those people are Nazis. They're terrible. I'm just not even going to look at it, because if people even think I'm looking at it, that means they might think I'm a Nazi. So, I don't know. That's pretty powerful propaganda.
It is, but again, it goes back to what I was saying before about the weaponization of words. That people twisted the term Nazi. All it should be is a reference to history and the Second World War. Instead, it's been not weaponized to be a slur and to call, and a call to cancel culture and to cancel someone. And it's absolutely been distorted and used in the wrong context.
Yep.
Tina Bojan says, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll just be brief. Well, that's what's interesting about when when people propagate those things, or they parrot those things they've heard, Nazi, Hitler, and you'll say, you'll ask questions like, weren't the Nazis defeated in 1945? Or what do you think about Project Paperclip? You'll ask those questions. There ought to be crickets, or you'll get blocked.
Yeah. And Tina Bojan says, I've had 22 years of Catholic education and I'm faithful, but I also know the church as an institution is corrupt. Absolutely, Tina. And I've talked about it a number of times. When it comes to our church, and we know this, and most Catholics, most discerning Catholics, and I can tell you this, Tina can attest to this, most Catholics that are on the ball understand that our church right now is infiltrated by a large contingent of Luciferian people. It's infiltrated by a large network of pedophiles, and just like a lot of major entertainment entities, a lot of major studios, a lot of major things, industries, period. It has to be cleared out of these people. God, I'd love to do that with a wood chipper, but this is how it is. Eternal Vigilance says we have to remember different things affect people certain ways. There's always hope in waking people up. With more and more people dying, I'm sure it's waking up family members and friends. Well,
you would think.
You would. Dwayne Erickson.
This is where we get into the Stockholm, syndrome aspect of the propaganda.
Yes.
It's like a battered wife getting beat up. No, he really loves me. He's just, he's having a bad day or whatever it is.
Yeah. Hail to Dwayne Erickson, by the way. Hail Dwayne, and then hail Rita. Love you guys, and pretty much we're all sinners, man. Remember, awesome one started out of original sin, brother.
Yep.
And the thing is I look at and RR's right about this. All the religious institutions are corrupted right now. And they're corrupted in different ways. The Islamic, especially the radical Islamic, have been gaslit to be that way. And the same thing with the Jews on the other side, to try to keep them at war with one another. Again, because it is to take away from allowing people to see through the facade of distraction. Because there's so many multi layers to this. And when, and I'm glad Wes mentioned Operation Paperclip, because here in America is one of the countries that took those very people that we defeated, the fascists, the actual fascists, by taking them in. You can argue, well, we started, a quicker pathway to our own demise. Because we sold our soul as a country to get these people in, to get a quicker fast track to power. But again, you sell your soul for power. What good is the power when you lose yourself? So, that's what we're fighting against here too. This is a horrible decision in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean, if it would have been like maybe half a dozen, maybe that the rocket people, that would have been okay. But MK Ultra, all that stuff, all those people from over there, we brought all of them over. Medical, I mean, very bad people.
Well, if we wanted to say, and to address Tina's story and her anecdote here, and I'm so sorry, Tina. My heart goes out to you, and God bless you. But let's look at that for a minute. We were told through mass media, through social media, well, you don't want to harm grandma, and you don't want to hurt this person and that person. So, think about being, possibly getting an inoculation. You don't want to hurt so-and-so. You want to attend events, and they always use the words, oh, you want to do this. Do you ever notice that? You want to, because they're playing on your sense of of needing that social connection, because as human beings, what do? We come by naturally socially connecting to one another. We're social animals. So that's important to us. Our interpersonal relationships are everything, with our families, with our friends. And they know this. So they're going to play on that first.
Yep.
And again, Papa Cotton, I think you're wrong there, because look, you're making a blanket generalization, dude. And you can't do that. That's the same thing. That's the very reason why Kanye West lost all his credibility, because again, blanket generalizations.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, the Bible, there's a lot of knowledge contained in the Bible, and you know, there have been different interpretations of that knowledge, and sometimes outright lies regarding the lessons in the Bible. And some, you know, one of the cool things about going to church, I mean, and what, you know, aside from the fellowship, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Papa, but you know, this particular church that I went to, they had a lot of different guest pastors. One of them like used puppets, which I think I brought my grandmother to that one, and she was totally appalled by it. But
I've never seen pastor of puppets. I'm pulling the strings.
Right. Well, he was puppets up this way, and then there was, you know, there was another pastor. You know, I mean, this is a very affluent church, and they brought in this black pastor that preached in the black pastor style. And this dude, you know, that he was a very compelling speaker. It was very cool to experience what it's like to have a black pastor preach in that traditionally black pastor style, you know, bombastic and just top, like, you know, really fucking bringing the fire. Top, yeah. You know, this dude was great, and he had a really interesting interpretation of a story that many people know, the prodigal son. I love that story, and he was saying that. You know, always when you think of the prodigal son, you think about the son that left, right? That's the one that needed the help. And his take on the prodigal son was that it was the son that stayed behind that was doing the right things for the wrong reasons. And that was the son that was lost, not the one that came back, because the one that came back, when he came back, he got it. But the son that had been there the whole time, he was doing the right things for the wrong reasons, and he never got it. It never got in his heart. And I thought that was amazing. I thought that was truly compelling. I thought that was one of the best, you know, the best public speakings I've ever seen. So, well, I mean, I get it.
And that's the thing. And that's why, you know, I read like now I disagree with Papa Cotton when he's talking about the Bible. And again, I didn't want to go into a whole theological debate, but I'm just going to say, you know, to get off this topic, look, Papa, you know, with the Bible, I use it personally as a guide, and it doesn't guide my moral compass per se, but the parables in it have value, you know, and there's certain things, certain life lessons to be taken from that. That's all, you know. Yeah. So maybe you don't look at it that way, and you look at it as a worthless book, and that's fine. I mean, if you look at it that way, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. I'm going to probably roll my eyes, but, you know, I mean, that's fine, dude. You know, hey, you, bro.
I don't go to church. I'm just giving an explanation for, you know, how people find value in it. But yeah, Papa says there's only so many times you can go to church and be judged like Mary Magdalene. Fuck them. Yeah, being judged. Well, I mean, it seems like that happens in many churches.
Yeah, you know, and look, when people get super judgy, and I don't care what reason they're being super judgy, because it ain't just Christians that are super judgy. Woke people are super judgy, and I tell them off too. I got no problem telling anybody off. If you're super judgy, then you're just being an idiot. You know, because we shouldn't be super judgy. What we should do is, you know, let people live their damn lives and not worry about it. You know, do what you need to do for you. But help your brothers and sisters from the standpoint of when you see somebody fall, you pick them up. When you see somebody in need, you help them out. When you see somebody, and things like that. That's all. So there's value in thinking that way. But no, you shouldn't be sitting there telling somebody how they got to live their life. That's on them. You can give them your advice, but no, if you start telling them how to live their life, then you're just being a judgmental prick.
Yeah. Well, I've heard it's different too, depending on, the tithing that certain folks give to the church, which could be seen as a huge hypocrisy, because some people are more generous with the church than others. I mean, my great grandmother, she gave pretty generously to her church. And let me tell you, going to church with her was quite an experience because, I mean, my great grandma was pretty well off, we'd roll up to church and, her Buick Riviera that she had. And, she would have a special parking spot for her because she gave so much to the church. And like she had like a reserved pew. It was very different.
Yeah, and again, and there's certain things I don't agree with that either. It's like you get into the whole organizational aspect of let's value this person over this person because of money. Again, and look, we know, Wes and I know, because we know the lie that is the Federal Reserve. We know money has no value any damn way. It really doesn't. When you get down to it, it has no value. It's fiat currency. Now, if we were back on the gold standard and it was backed by something, yeah, it would have good value. But it don't have value for shit. But that's the illusion. Again, that's your illusion there. Illusionary tactic. They keep us controlled by money. We're slaves to money. I mean, we sit here every day and we raise the alarm about going to the social credit score system like China, but institutionally, okay, we're slaves to a credit score. Now, I'm going to tell you folks this right now. Full transparency, truth be told, because I already talked with Wes earlier tonight about this before we even went live. So you guys know the story, to kind of give you folks an idea. Most of you in our audience do know the story because you've been with me for a long time as viewers and supporters of the channel, so you understand. Since Mama Heretic died, okay, I got all of that immediate, upon her death, all of that immediate stuff that I found out, which was, what I was told as opposed to what the actual truth was based on, the amount of debt that we actually had. So, I looked at that and then, for example, now, when I recently got approved as head of the estate, finally, the bank refused to redo the mortgage in my name because of what's the biggest thing that they judge criteria on? A credit score. So I was 20, 30 points away from what they would require to approve a loan. So I was automatically denied. So what happens is, they trapped me, and this is straight up strong arming by this bank. So they said, well, the only option that you have based on the fact that your account has been delinquent for blah, 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 and this was, my mom had it. All we can do is offer you a mortgage repayment plan. I said, well, why can't you do a forbearance? We can't do a forbearance because they didn't give me a solid reason. They just said, we can't do a forbearance. You have to agree to this mortgage repayment plan. So the mortgage went from $450 a month to $600. And even though I was working, it became, cost negative for me to be able to pay it. It's crazy. And so I'm stuck into that. And there's a whole other stuff attached to it. Like, my realtor was a moron. I just had to dump my realtor and a meeting with the new one tomorrow because there was no urgency on his part to help me get the home sold right now, which you guys know this is my one ticket to actually, getting out from under the house and starting over and actually, getting into my own life, because for the past 10 to 15 years, I was taking care of my folks as they got sick. So I'm currently locked into the $600 a month mortgage payment that is cost prohibitive, but I had no choice but to agree to it. They essentially strong-armed me into that decision, or we're foreclosing and taking your home. And so that's what I'm faced with. I was actually talking to our friend PJ Orville Nation last night, and I was telling him, man, I may have to start a crowdfund because I got to make the mortgage payment this month. Otherwise, they're going to take the house. I miss one payment, they're going to take the house. So, so I have to do this dance with them for the next probably 2 months yet, because my new realtor, I'm meeting with her tomorrow, and I probably won't be out. A minimum, I'll be out probably mid-February. So I have to deal with this garbage until mid-February. So that means I got to pay for this month, next month, and mid-February or in February. So it's rough. And we've all got it rough, but the banks have us by the collective balls because they're calling the shots. And again, even though they're not central banks, the banks largely are not our friends.
Yeah. It's pretty terrible that happened. That's happening.
And look, I've somehow managed to get through up till now, by smoke and mirrors and making payment arrangements with utilities, the whole 9 yards, to try to spread the money around to make sure that I can rob Peter to pay Paul, essentially. And I've managed to do it, but it's a hell of an existence, man. And once I'm on the other side of this and I get this home sold, I'm telling you guys, it's going to be the greatest day of my life to actually, start over fresh. Because, man, this year, and I know Wes has had a rough year. I've had a rough year. Many of you in the audience have had a rough year. This year has been hard on all of us. And I hope,
it's been pretty miserable.
I really do hope that even though we're going through what I consider to be the turning of humanity, we're at a turning point. I'm hoping that this coming year is going to be kinder to all of us. And I think it will, because tying it back into tonight's topic, okay, the more truth that comes out, the more freedom we gain back. And we need to continue to push and push and push and get the truth out there.
Yep.
So, we're not going to give up. Wes and I are not going to give up.
No, I think you got to try and look at things objectively. That's what you have to do. Like, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to be. This is what I have to do to get to the next step, to get to where I want to be. And, you have your strategic planning, your tactical planning, and your contingency planning. And we're in like contingency planning mode right now, and just have to ride this shit out and do the best you can to get through it. And you're
Well,
doing a good job. And, our folks in the chat are hanging in
and you're
there.
doing a good
And
job too. And we're
well,
we're we're all going to get through this, brother.
absolutely. Awesome one says, yeah, that I took, Wes took us on one of his woe is me streams and I was blessed. Well, hopefully because you were recognizing how much you have to be grateful for and happy for in your life. Awesome one. But yeah, I mean, occasionally, yeah, I can brood. I can brood with the best of them. I'm a great brooder. A lot of introverts are really good at brooding. And that's definitely, I guess that's a plus. I'm a good brooder. But yeah, I mean, when you're in the thick of the shit, it's hard to maintain a positive attitude. It
It
really
really
is.
is. We said that in concert, dude, because we just timing. That's exactly what it is, bro. Serendipitous right there, but that's the truth. It is hard, but it's always darkest before the dawn, my friends. And listen, the dawn is coming because the more that we stick together, as a viewership, as hosts, as journalists, you know, um, we're we're doing what we can, all in our own ways. But we've all got a front row seat to this, whether we want it or not. So you may as well take that front row seat and be in the thick of it. And it's funny, awesome one. I've got leftover chili in my fridge that I made the other day, man. I've rode that chili out now for 4 days, bro. And I make a damn good pot of chili, so I can make it last. But that's the thing, we got to do what we got to do.
God, I'm looking for things that are close to expiration or past their expiration and asking for discounts. Like it's that bad.
Yeah, but again, and I don't want to get into that psyop, but there's a definite one going on to wreck the supply chain, a scarcity psyop, if you will. That is happening real time. Okay, just last week, and shout out to our good friend Katina Martin, big supporter of Dick's Division programming, big supporter of Dick's adjacent channels, everything else. I talked to her. She's okay, by the way. In Moore County, North Carolina, last week, there was a major substation power outage. Now, again, we had dueling narratives. We had the leftists were pointing the finger at, quote, right-wing extremist terrorism, saying, well, right-wingers shot up that substation because they wanted to disrupt a drag show, and it's all because people like Libs of TikTok and those went, they are anti-trans people. Then you had right-wingers saying, well, it was some crazy eco-terrorist people that did it. Blah, blah, blah. Now, I put a tweet out there and I offered this. Based on the research I've done, factual research that shows that the globalists, with not only with not only them running the UN, which they have force right there, they have a private army, a private mercenary army. This is verifiable information that is almost the extent in force manpower as a small-sized country. And we're talking special operations units, we're talking troops, we're talking armored divisions, we're talking aircraft, the whole 9 yards. So it's not hard out of the realm of possibility, as far-fetched as it may be, for them to run any operation that they want, any shadow operation in any country at any time, and get in and get out and cause the desired effect. which is in this case panic because 40,000 people went without power for days. So, so I offered that. And I didn't say that was the direct cause of that power station attack, but you have to use your discerning mind and say, okay, that is one possibility. And I would never misrepresent it as fact. I'm just saying that it is a possibility. But this is another thing, and it's for a topic for another stream where we could get into the vulnerability of the power grid, because there's been previous incidents like that in California. Back in 2013, there was a substation that was shot up by sniper rifle fire, incidentally, that didn't get too much media coverage other than local California coverage. Really you didn't hear about that in the national news at the time. But that's what I'm saying. There's always something going on. Now, we as citizens aren't privy to it, but there's usually always something going on. Whether that's going to get reported or not, that's up to now listening to citizen journalists and getting it from independent sources, because you're not ever, and it's been demonstrated, you're not ever going to get it from the mainstream ever again.
It seems pretty hush-hush.
Even if some of when we were growing up traditionally, the era of the straight journalist guy is long since been over with. I think the last honest guy that I ever heard on radio or television was probably Paul Harvey.
Yeah, Paul Harvey, definitely. I think we have some modern times. I think Matt Taibbi is really good and pretty honest with his takes. And
Glenn
Greenwald might be another example of a mainstream media person that went off and became independent.
Terminus, what's funny about that, and I was talking about the power grid actually. The other night I did Twitter Space, and it's pretty much me and Terminus having a conversation about it. But we were talking about the power grid, and one of the things is with Terminus mentioning the Dark Winter thing. That is a video. That is a stream that I did that got pulled down by YouTube. That was one of the streams that YouTube censored and pulled down for misinformation. Now, I think that they might have done it because of the way that I worded the title, but the actual programming that I covered in that particular live stream was, I spoke about Operation Dark Winter. We want to talk about PSYOPs. That was another one. And that was a quote exercise on how the government would handle a quote mass casualty event or a major catastrophic event, if you will. And it's very telling, because out of that operation, you got another thing that I covered on that live stream, which was DHS Directive 51, otherwise known as National Security Presidential Directive 51, which, by the way, to this day, and I think that you guys have heard me talk about it before, it's still in the government toolbox. So they can use that at any time, which gives the government the broad ability to federalize anything in the name of security and continuity of government, quote, continuity of government. And just a little FYI, do you know what administration that came out of? Because it wasn't a Democratic one. That was the Bush administration. Mm-hmm. And what do we know that the Bush family is famous for? big oil. What do we know that they're equally famous for? Being globalists. And again, we go
Oh,
back to
back and to the left also.
we go back to the Uniparty. There it is. So again, we can sit here and say, oh, vote red all day, vote blue all day. It's bullshit. It's always been bullshit.
Yeah.
What it is get the establishment out of there.
Yeah, Bush was trying to get rid of posse comitatus.
Yes.
Which was shocking. I remember when that happened, he wanted them to repeal posse comitatus. For those that may be catching us on the replay, I know most of our chat knows, but posse comitatus basically says you can't have U.S. troops, the U.S. military, stationed in a state without that state's consent. And so, that's what the National Guard is there for. And you could go into a debate about the National Guard, because that was a Woodrow Wilson thing. Before, the National Guard is what the militias used to be. And he federalized the militias, and that became the National Guard, which I believe is unconstitutional. But anyway, that's the last vestige we have to hold on to that. That was the argument against repealing posse comitatus was, hey, we've already got the National Guard. Why are you trying to repeal posse comitatus? If you need to activate the National Guard, just ask us nicely, Mr. President, and we'll do it. And so that was a very interesting development during the Bush administration, a very interesting debate to see that shape up. Nobody said, hey, nobody bothered to go back and look at the history of the National Guard and the militias and the federalization that happened under Woodrow Wilson. It's just like, no, we've got the National Guard. It's that Hegelian, I'm getting mad. It's that Hegelian dialectic,
Mm-hmm.
We want this, we're going to ask for this. And if we get this, we're okay, because now we're here instead of here. And,
hail to Tim Hayes, by the way. Nice
hail,
to
my
see you,
friend.
Tim. One of the interesting things about that, Wes, getting into what you were talking about there is, an awesome one even says militias are needed. And we are going to need things like that, because if things get increasingly authoritarian, which, by the way, and I don't want to, I don't want to get into a 9/11 conspiracy show either, but I will say this. What was born out of 9/11 with the Patriot Act laid the groundwork for all administrations to follow, for them to broadly surveil citizens and everything else based on the Patriot Act. So, they put a fancy word on it. Again, we talk about, gaslighting and buzzwords and changing, and setting things up as triggers. Well, you had that where nobody batted an eyelash, because at the time, everything was patriotic. Everybody was united. So the Patriot Act sounded like a good thing. But what it did was open up a Pandora's box of surveillance. That's where the surveillance state really took hold.
Yeah. And do you remember, since we're talking about PSYOPs tonight, do you remember how they pushed that? You'd have the news on, Americans have been polled, and they've said that they would be willing to give up some liberties for security. Remember that? And it was like, okay, let's pass the Patriot Act. They don't care.
Yeah, and that's why it went through, and there was no pushback, and that's how they slid this National Security Presidential Directive 51, and this was toward the end of Bush's administration. They just slid that in, like, okay, nobody noticed. NSPD 51 sitting right there, and any president can use that to this day. Because they can use previous executive orders if they feel they need to. Yep. So that's right there in the toolbox, folks.
It is, man. See, I mean, this is how you go down the rabbit hole, folks. I mean, I know you guys know this, but if anybody's catching us on the replay here, look, I mean, I just recently got done with this book, Chaos, which we talked about the Manson family links to MK Ultra, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first half of the book is all this guy was, a reporter. He was a writer. He's being an apologist for being a conspiracy theorist or sounding like a conspiracy theorist. The first half of the book is all him journaling, talking about the process, talking about the conversations that he had with Bugliosi and other folks that were involved in the prosecution of Manson, his time in LA. And then, the second half of the book is when it gets really interesting because he's like, well, then I started digging into the stuff that happened before he got to LA when he was, when he was in San Francisco. And there was this, there was this doctor there that was part of, the intelligence establishment that was giving free healthcare to the hippies as part of the, that commune movement. And it turns out this guy was, just these bizarre connections, right? And you have Charles Manson is like, well, they kept letting Charles Manson out. He was on probation and he kept getting arrested for these serious crimes, and no one could figure out why they let him out. What happened? And he's like digging through, and it's like, well, that's weird. His probation officer ended up, becoming the foster child of Charles Manson's son when he was an infant. And it's like,
Yeah.
And he went and he talked to the child support people, and they're like, would you have let this child, he's like, no, that would have been a conflict of interest. I mean, I can't believe that was allowed to happen. And just, it gets weirder and weirder as he goes through it, these connections. And there's a certain doctor, Dr. West, that was tied in directly, I think, with MK Ultra. And he's trying to, he's like, there's a lot of smoke here and none of this makes any sense. And you find the same thing with like Jonestown and stuff like that. It's crazy.
Well,
you look at one thing that seems unrelated to this vast conspiracy, and these same folks keep showing up.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, Wes, because I had a fascinating conversation recently with, again, Will. Shout out to Will from, my pal Will from United Resistance and everything. Mm-hmm. We were talking, and I was telling Will about, it was right after one of the recent school shootings, and I said, look, I'm not so sure that the experimentation with MK Ultra is finished. And I say that because it's very weird when you look at the profile of some of these school shooters and how they pop up on the scene, and how that they have, interestingly enough, FBI handlers, some of them.
Or like, in the case of Columbine, I think wasn't Klebold and Harris's family, didn't they both work for government in some capacity?
That
military industrial complex?
It's quite possible, but I'm looking at it from the aspect of, well, and this is a hypothetical, folks, so I want to make the disclaimer. I am not putting this in a basis of fact, just so that you know, okay, this is just a hypothetical. But let's say, what if the scenario was that MK Ultra is still in play? It's not far-fetched to conceive of the idea that our own government, CIA, the FBI, could have a psychological program using these types of methods, MK Ultra and others, to create essentially a fire and forget human, which I mean turn them into or stimulate very primal tendencies in order for them to pull off this type of incident in a one-off. And then they go and say, well, this person was exposed to guns or this or that, and they blame the family, whatever. But they always have a plausible deniability. They always have a cover story. But it's not far-fetched to put it in the ether and say, hey, wait a minute. Could that be a possibility? That's all I'm saying. And I want to.
The Batman shooter, the Dark Knight shooter, he had an FBI handler, didn't he?
Oh God, I almost
James.
I want to say
He had one,
yeah.
and then I think the guy that shot up the Pulse nightclub wasn't the FBI at least aware of that guy? And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of strange stuff that happens with respect to that. Well, we know for sure that the Unabomber was actually legitimately a part of the MK Ultra program. He legitimately was.
Yeah. And RR says, as soon as the MK Ultra program was uncovered, the Congress should have demolished the CIA. But they're all on the take or have control files, so the clown world just keeps growing. Yeah, and again, RR, it goes back to what I said to Laura Logan on Twitter. I said we're in the greatest conspiracy of our time. So if the truth were to come to light about all of it, can you just imagine, guys and gals out there listening? Can you imagine how the world would change? I mean, it would change on a dime, because everything you thought was real, you would have to rethink. Everything that you or a lot of people that you perceived as being legendary or great human beings or this or that, all of a sudden that goes out the window. Because then you find out, really and truly, they were tyrants. Yeah. And man, the world would change on a dime. And all that institutional power goes back to the people.
Yep. I just want to get to this comment that RR made here. As soon as the MK Ultra program was uncovered, the Congress should have demolished the CIA, but they're all in the take or have control files. So Clown World just keeps on growing. Well, it's interesting because when they were uncovering that stuff, well, number one, they called it the family jewels, which should tell you all you need to know. And then number two, the guy that was there, this goes to the deep state. There are factions in the deep state. You had the William Colby faction, which, so I was laughing at that earlier too, which Chip Tatum of the Tatum Chronicles, if you've read that, that was one faction. Then you had the George Bush faction. And William Colby was like, hey, man, this is what we do. This is what we have to do to keep the country safe. We're doing it for the national interest. And I'm going to tell you what we're doing so you know what we're doing. And then you had the George Bush faction, which was like, no, you're giving away the family jewels. And they got rid of Colby and they brought in Bush. And as soon as they brought in Bush, you were getting nothing. Mark Lane actually talked about this in, was it Final Word? Was that what it was? I think it was his last book, but he was talking about his experiences and how things changed once Bush became the DCI. And it was like, nobody wanted to cooperate. They didn't want to testify under oath anymore. The CIA didn't. They wanted to swear everyone that they testified to secrecy. And then every person that they testified to had to have a security clearance. And just that totally changed the hearings that were going on.
Well, you go back and look through like the Bush administration, for example, the amount of people you had Cheney that was a part of what was his company?
Halliburton.
Yeah, Halliburton. You had he was if I remember correctly in the Council of Foreign Relations. I mean, you've got these people directly involved with the globalists. That's it right in a nutshell. I mean, right dead on. Council of Foreign Relations. You guys know what that is. The people that watch these programs regularly, whether it's United Resistance or this one, you guys understand what that is. That's a portion of the whole globalist pyramid scheme. That's just one of the entities. The globalists have many competing factions, but they all have one thing in common: they want to be the leader of the tyranny. Yes, and that's why
that's why I have reservations about Musk.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to bring that up, but you grabbed it, Wes. That's good on you, right there. Will says Bush too invited all his oil baron friends to serve in the cabinet. Yes, he did. That's a given. They were
Well,
either
and again here, I mean, if you look into Bush 2, even Bush 1, their oil, their experience in the oil industry isn't what it appears to be.
no, they're all globalists. They are, Cheney. That's why it's a joke that anybody takes Liz Cheney seriously. What do you think happened with the people? And we have political prisoners right now on American soil, and say what you want about the J6 people, that's up to you guys individually. But I can tell you from being on site and right there that there are a number of those people who are being unjustly held on very, salacious charges. These are charges that are, not to make a pun, but trumped up charges. And they're being held unjustly. I mean, you have people from grandmas to, just ordinary average dudes. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. But you have jokes like Liz Cheney on that committee, who again is an avowed globalist. Dick Cheney and their family are knee deep in it, and that is fact. That's verifiable fact. You can go back and look at the list of people that are in the the Bilderberg meetings, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, any of these, and see name after name after name. Bush administration, Clinton administration, all of them. Obama administration, you name it, they're there.
Yep. Yeah, Dick Cheney, in one of the CFR meetings was talking about how he kept being in the CFR from his constituents. That dude is just a complete POS.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Absolutely, Wes. And again, the wool continues to be pulled over the eyes of not only Americans, and because this isn't a geopolitical thing. This is all over the world. The same things are repeated. I mean, we think our country's bad, but look what's happened to Canada. Canada is practically, for lack of a better term, a communist almost, but a hybrid communist dictatorship. I mean, you have people in Canada on kill lists, basically, in the sense of that all that MAIDS stuff that they had, which is assisted suicide, which is they're not using in a benevolent aspect by any means. They're taking the less fortunate. They're taking the seniors. They're taking the people with PSD, like military people, are being urged to take their own lives. I mean, this is bonkers, ridiculous. But this is what we're facing. I mean, when you get down to, and you say, well, who are the globalists? Who is the, quote, cabal, or however you want to frame it? Well, to put it in a raw term, it's a death cult. It's always been about reducing the population and taking away the barriers of class, so that there's no middle class. There's just haves and have-nots.
Yep.
There's a serf class, and then there's a super elite, and that's it.
Yep. And yeah, you're never going to be able to get ahead. They're never going to let you get ahead. Wherever you're born, whatever circumstances you're born into, that's where you stay.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they want. And if you start to get ahead without their approval, that done. Or a re-education camp, you're just going to have a very difficult time.
RR says straight up Soylent Green in Canada down to the exact year. Yeah, and
Night Keck.
I fear for the people that are our friends. Good night, Keck. Have a good night. Um, I fear for the people that are our friends in Canada because, I mean, my goodness, you can almost make the argument they're calling Canada right now. It's crazy, and those people are at the mercy of real authoritarian draconian government. It's bad. We're
I'm very
lucky. We're lucky here.
yeah. I mean, it's maybe it's like Alex Jones says, we're the best house on a bad block. That's kind of how I grew up, though. But I mean, it's very alarming because you have people fleeing Canada to come down here. Viva Frey fled Canada, and then some of our friends were even talking about wanting to get out of Canada. The ones that are still in Canada, and it's just I never thought I would see that in a Western country, especially one like Canada that's so, that has a reputation for being so free. It's really alarming. It's extremely disturbing.
Yeah. And RR says, what happens in Canada won't stay there. It's coming here. Yeah. I predict outside of a year, RR, we're going to have maids stuff popping up here. It's going to start here as well.
Well, they've kind of already tried it in a sense, with the death panels. And then they've kind of tried it. They try to roll this stuff out on the state level. See, that's one of the things where it's nice to hear like red-pilled lefties because Jimmy Dore, I think I was talking about him earlier. He's a lefty, and he was on Michael Malice's podcast the other day, and he was like, he was famous for like spitting at Trump or whatever with the Young Turks when he was with them. They had a falling out because the Young Turks sold out. But anyway, he was talking about when he first really started to becoming red pilled, and he was talking about the 2012 election. He's like, wait, I get to choose between Obamacare and fucking Romney care? Like what? And that was kind of, that was one of the obvious things about that election was, wait a second, you've got Romney care versus Obamacare. Like Romney was the first one to roll this shit out. His version of Obamacare, what eventually became Obamacare. And then, you find out the same dude came up with both of those plans. It was one plan. It's just like, it's good to see lefties get red pilled,
Yeah, you get into the illusion of choice aspect, and it's good when you you get an opportunity to pull those walls down and you can see it clearly. But we still got, as people mentioned before, we still got people living in their bubble, but either by choice or by ignorance. You're worried about your everyday, you're worried about what's happening to you, and you're not paying attention. And they count on that because you're not paying attention. So that is the problem because you can't develop your discernment. You can't keep your instincts sharp when you're not paying attention. But yet there are a lot of people that are willfully ignorant or just, just low information that haven't done their research yet that either they don't know or they don't care. Or, there's some people that just can't handle being outside of their comfort bubble. They can't handle the discomfort of what's actually going on. Thankfully, I'm made of sterner stuff. I can handle it, and I'm fighting against it.
Took me a while. When I first got red pilled, I was pretty disturbed that the world I thought I was living in was not the world I was living in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, dude, it shook me to my core when I first found out about Agenda 21 because I said, well, surely this can't be real. But guess what? It was, because I did the research on it myself, and I was like, holy shit. Well, I know, I guess I know what time it is. For me, vigilance, it was right around the end of 09 going into 10. That's when it was for me. When the process started for me.
Yeah, it's interesting, eternal vigilance. I think it was like a sliding scale for me. I mean, I had some exposure to alternative media. My brother was into alternative media. My mom worked for public access, so I got a lot of exposure there when I was in high school. But just a simple reading of the Constitution, it's like, hey, we're not following this thing. This is all different, and asking questions, not really getting good answers. But still, I mean, when I really got red pilled, probably started when Jericho came out. When was that? 2007?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So it started with Jericho. And then I think, like you, Drew, around 08, 09, just really watching a lot of the Alex Jones show and going down those different rabbit holes and being challenged. I think, one of my car enthusiasts, remember when bulletin boards were a thing? I think even before 2007, I think that's what got me turned on to Jericho, actually, now that I think about it. One of my car enthusiasts, bulletin boards, they have like a discussing section or whatever. And I was like, oh, you fuck conspiracy theorist or whatever. And the guy, you or whatever, this guy's like, okay, well, you just go ahead and prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. And so I accepted the challenge, and I went fully into looking for things to prove this guy wrong. And just like we talked about pulling the thread, and this leads to this, leads to that, leads to this, I went down the rabbit hole, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, not only is it what you said, but it is worse than what you said. And eventually, you just get to a point where you just keep going down that rabbit hole, and it goes deep. So probably 09, I think I would consider myself awake.
I'll never forget, because I've told the story many times, but I was driving around on a summer night listening to Coast AM. Nori had a woman on that had written a book about it. And she was talking about them back then buying up land for this UN Agenda 21. Mm-hmm. And then as he was interviewing her and she was talking about it, I got home from driving around and I went on the computer and I looked it up right on the UN website. Started reading the shit, global sustainability and all this nonsense, all those buzzwords, if you will. And I realized that, like, holy shit, this is real. And it's clear as day what they want to do. So That's what put me onto it. And then, of course, not long after, I got into, paying more attention to Alex Jones and things like that. So,
yeah, I mean, there are other good ones out there as well. I mean, there were some things that Alex Jones, like he had on Lindsey Williams and some of Lindsey Williams stuff. If you checked into, they're referencing a certain book that he did, and the things he was saying that he said in the book on the show were not said in the book. And so he definitely got some things wrong there. And then Steve Pachinik, boy, that guy ended up being bad news. That guy ended up trying to lead him down the Q realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, I see you, Gambit. You're trying to tell me it's time for bed. I know. It's 2:30 in the morning. I'm going. Well, and on that note, Gambit has uncanny timing, folks. He knows when to tell me, Dad, it's time for bed. And it probably is, because as I said, it's 2:30 in the morning here, and so I think we're gonna wind down the stream, but we'll go ahead and let Wes have his final thought on the subject, and then we'll let him talk about what he's got going on. So, Wes, what's your final takeaway from the stream before we wrap up?
My final takeaway from this is that we have some brilliant people that founded this country, and they left us a constitution, and they left us great documentation on why they made the government that we have, the government we have. And if you have core principles, you can never go wrong. No matter what they throw at you, If it conflicts with your core principles, you just don't go for it. And that's a good rule of thumb for anyone out there. And that's why we need to hold the Constitution in such high regard. What do I have going on? I've gotten another strike on my channel. They tried to give me 3. I ended up with 1. I beat 2 of them. Tell me if you haven't seen this movie before, but, and then oddly enough, I got, Facebook flagged me and took down one of my posts and got me in trouble at the same time from a post from 2019. Isn't that strange how that happens at the same time? It's, again, I've seen this movie
that
before.
Retroactive cancellation, right?
I know, it's so weird that would happen at the same time. But anyway, you can find me for now on YouTube at Whatevercast Official for now, and then you can find me at Odyssey at Wes Moody Webcast. So maybe Odyssey might be the better bet right now. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna rebuild a YouTube channel for the 3rd time if they decide to ditch this one. But
well, and listen, I can tell you, Wes, in some form or fashion, you and I will stay involved together on YouTube in some form or fashion. Even if it's to have you regularly on when I live stream or whatever. But we'll do what we can. And look, folks, I'm living under the same threat. YouTube regularly comes for me. You guys know that they pulled down content of mine before. I fought them tooth and nail over, quote, misinformation, quote, medical misinformation, anything that they could find. And a lot of times it's been episodes of this program, not even United Resistance. Hell, they pulled down a stream about Sasquatch, for God's sakes. But, this is where we're at. They're going to mess with anybody that gets in the way of the narrative. They're going to come after the truthers. And that's why they don't like Wes. They don't like me, because we don't back down and we don't play nice and we don't conform. And that's why they don't like us. That's probably why a lot of our peers in the content creation realm don't necessarily like us. But, Wes and I do what we do. We're dedicated to the fight for truth. And that's how it is. And we're not going to stop with that. And I have his back. He has mine. And that's all I need to know. Because I'll ride or die with this dude. I'm telling you that right here and there. I'll ride or die with this guy.
Absolutely, man.
So, but I want to say again, thank you, everyone, for turning out, watching the broadcast, whether you watched on Twitch or watched on YouTube. I'm definitely interested to see how the VOD does on Twitch and how people engage with that. And, I think thank you to all of those of you that watched on YouTube as well. And again, I will probably be putting together a crowdfund. You really do have to get that issue with the bank taken care of, at least for this month. And I'm getting a new realtor, which is good. So that'll be helpful, and hopefully, we can keep things going. But I'm glad that we did this stream. This was an epic stream. It was an epic topic. And it crisscrossed into not only Midnight Prism territory, but United Resistance territory. And we got to really get into some awesome things. So thank you again so much, Wes. I appreciate it. And I can't wait till we collaborate again, my friend.
Absolutely, man. This was great. We really did bring the fire.
Yes, we did, sir. Yes, we did. All right, folks. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other, man. We love you all, and we will see you soon. So have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, hi, Coast Casino.
Hey, welcome to Sporking News Podcast. My name is Scott.
I'm E. Temple Queen of the Place to Be Reviews.
I am the Patriot, Drew Taylor, aka Supreme Heretic.
The Red Gaze on YouTube, at the Red Gaze on Twitter.
What up?
Hello, everybody. It's me, Vinny.
The voice of Immortal Coil.
Oh, hey, I am the Ghost Bear.
What's going on, Tommy? And get anybody go like this?
Yeah, I'm Wes Moody of the Wes Moody of Whatevercast.
Hey, I remember
Tone,
that.
Death, Rock.
I remember that dude too.
I mean, we have a lot of cool things over there. I did some magic tricks.
Hi, guys. Try to stay here.
My name is Monkey Knight.